Hey there, just before we get into the podcast, a quick reminder we could use your financial help. Please support us on Patreon so we can keep on keeping on. Check the Patreon links to donate. Hope you enjoy this episode.
Hi, welcome to Talking Books and Stuff, the program that talks all about books and writing and stuff. Here's your host, Dennis Rimmer.
Hello again. Welcome back to Talking Books and Writing and Stuff, your favorite podcast, I'm sure. With us today from sunny California is Steve Bluestein. Steve, a comedian, a writer, founding member of the Groundlings comedy troupe, I understand. Been on television, written books, lots of stuff. And so we'll let Steve open us up by answering the first question. Steve, how's your prostate these days?
Oh, it's in a jar at Cedars.
So you have a book out called Take My Prostate, Please.
Right.
And
I had been diagnosed with prostate cancer. And as I was going through the process, things would be happening to me that don't happen to other people. You know, funny things. Because I'm a comedy writer, so I see things through a comic's eye. And I said, well, I better start writing this stuff down. So I started documenting day by day what was going on through the diagnosis and the surgery and then the recovery. And what I ended up with was a book that was very funny and yet very touching and very revealing. But more importantly, it was a book that anyone going through prostate surgery or living with someone who's going through prostate surgery could certainly use as a guideline. I mean, everybody's experience is different, but I hit most of the high points of the experience. And so far, we're getting rave reviews, and we have 18 five-star reviews on Amazon, and people are buying it for other people, which is wonderful. You know, actually, I had a woman call and told me that she had 4 relatives with prostate cancer, and she was buying it for all of them. So that's great. That's what I was hoping would happen.
So you're in the back of your mind, you're thinking, oh my gosh, prostate cancer surgery, and then you started seeing what you said, the funny side of things. But on the serious side, prostate problems, us men, we still don't want to talk about that kind of stuff, it seems like.
Right, but the thing is that this is the kind of stuff that comes in. The day of my surgery, I went into Cedars, and I'm being interviewed by the admissions nurse, and she says, do you have a photo ID? And I said, a photo ID? Do you think someone's going to come in here and steal my prostate surgery? I mean, who gets up in the morning and says, you know what, I think we'll go to Cedars and I'll try to take someone else's prostate surgery. And that's the kind of stuff that was happening to me. And that's that lighter side, because being a comedy writer, I see things through different eyes. So somebody else would just give them their ID. But she asked me for the ID, and I said, well, what do you think? It's going to get stolen? It's
a collector's item? What's going on here?
It's a collector's item? Yeah, exactly. And that's the side that people are finding interesting, because it's an important subject, but if you can do it with a little humor, then that's even better.
Oh, exactly. You know? Steve Bluestein with us. The name is pronounced Stein, spelled blue, Stein. When you look it up on Amazon for Take My Prostate, Please, and other Steve books, such as 49 and a Half Shades of Bluestein, It's so hard to
And then
type with a gun in your mouth.
And the other latest one would be Memoir of a Nobody, and that one has 76 5-star reviews, and it chronicles my years on the road and writing for television and opening for Barry Manilow and Donna Summer and Melissa Manchester and Kenny Loggins and all those people that I opened for. And I'm told it's one of the funniest books that most people have ever read. So I'm very, very flattered.
Steve Bluestein with us. Where did you begin life's journey, and how did you get from your origins to where you are today? In a nutshell.
Well, I went to Emerson College in Boston, and then I went directly to New York City, where I was planning on being a singer. That didn't happen. I ended up working at Alexander's department store. So I came to California on a visit. I got here and thought, I felt like I lived here all my life. So I moved to California. I moved into an apartment building that happened to have Dave Madden lived in. And Dave was Reuben on the Partridge Family. And we'd all be sitting around by the pool, and I'd be making people laugh. Of course, at this time, I was the assistant buyer at the May Company in budget ladies' handbags. And he said to me one day, he said, Steve, you really have a gift. You could use this as a profession. He says, this new club just opened up on the Strip called the Comedy Store. Why don't we go down there? So the next night, Dave Madden took me to the Comedy Store. I sat in the audience. I watched what was going on stage, and I said, I could do that. And I came back the next week with 5 minutes worth of material, and Sammy Shore, who was the owner of the club at that time, came up to me and he said, kid, keep coming back. Keep coming back. You have the sound. You have that sound. And what he meant was people who do comedy have a specific sound to their delivery. And so with that little bit of encouragement, I came back every night for the next couple of years, and I developed being a stand-up comic. And at that time, Craig T. Nelson was there, and Barry Levinson was there, and Pat Proft, who wrote all the Zucker films. And, of course, these people were unknown at that time, but we were all hanging out together. And I got discovered out of the Comedy Store, was signed to ICM, and from that moment on, I haven't stopped working.
So you were there during the Help, I'm Dying Up Here days? Is that what you're saying? Is that got that era right?
The what year?
Well, that show that was on a couple of years ago, Help, I'm Dying Up Here, or?
Oh, yes, I'm actually in that book.
I thought so, because I read it, and the name sounded familiar. So
yeah, I was interviewed for it because when the comedians had the strike,
right,
I was involved in that. I was the PR person for the strike, and I was the one who got all the newspapers and television and radio stations involved in covering the strike. And so he wanted to talk to me, but more importantly, I was there from day one when there were no other comedy clubs in the entire United States. There was the Improv in New York City, and Sammy opened the Comedy Store, which was specifically for comedy. The Improv was for music and comedy and magic and Broadway singers and so. But the Comedy Store was specifically for comedy, and I was there from day one. I mean, I saw the development of the industry that is now the comedy club, business.
Right, and there's comedy clubs everywhere now. So, but
everywhere.
That was like 40 years ago.
I used to say that when I started, there were about 50 comedians, and now everybody's doing comedy. My cleaning woman can do 10 minutes.
Right. So back then, so what names other than yourself, what names stand out as people that you I knew
Jay
right
Leno,
off the bat? But
Jay Leno and David Letterman, Elaine Boozler, Tom Dreesen, George Miller, of course, Flip Wilson used to come. Red Fox used to come all the time. Richard Pryor would be there. And every night it was a different show, because people would just come in off the street and they'd get up on stage. David Brenner, Gabe Kaplan. It was a very exciting time. As a matter of fact, Pat Proft. Now, you may not know his name, but you know his films.
Yeah,
he wrote all the Zucker films, Airplane.
Naked Gun, 33 and
Naked
a third.
Gun, right? All those films.
Right.
Pat and I are still have remained very close friends, and he said we commiserate because it was actually more fun in the beginning trying to break into show business than it was breaking into show business, than getting into show business. Because once you're in, it's a job.
It's a job, yeah. And then
right, and when you're trying to get in, it's that excitement of, is tonight going to be the night? Am I going to be discovered tonight? But once you are discovered, it's a drudge. It's a lot of work.
Right.
On the plane every other day, every other week, and you're never being at home. And then when you're writing television, it's 14, 15-hour days, and it's a lot of work.
Steve Bluestein's with us. Apparently you were one of the founding members of the Groundlings comedy troupe. Is that right?
Yes. Again, coming off the Comedy Store, there was an improv group at the Comedy Store that was Pat Proft, again, Gary Austin, Valerie Curtin, and Bo Capral. And the night that I went there, I approached Valerie Curtin and I said, do you know of anybody starting a class that I could join? Because I had no experience. So she said to me, I think Gary is starting a class. So I approached Gary and I said, can I join your class? And he said, sure. And that class became the Groundlings. And in that class was Cindy Williams and Lorraine Newman and her sister Tracy Newman and oh God, I'm getting old now. It's hard. It's 40 years ago.
Yep.
But it all these people, Terry Garr and Jack Sue and just all these people were there at the beginning, and it eventually Gary said, I think we should do a show. And so we did. We do like 10-week class, and then we do a show. And because of those shows, Gary developed the Groundling Theater. Now, when the Groundling Theater officially opened, I had already left to go on the road to be an opening act. I would come back and pick up a class here and there, but the 3 years prior to the Groundlings opening, I was in that workshop, and we laid down all the groundwork for what later became the Groundling Theater.
And it's still going strong, right?
Oh my God! Pee Wee Herman, Edie McClurg, Elvira, everybody on Saturday Night Live.
Yeah.
It has become I think it's become what the Comedy Store was in the 70s in terms of finding new talent. The Groundling Theater has become now. To become and it's a huge industry. I mean, it's an industry. They have board of directors and they run classes, and they have another building now. And we lost Gary about 3 years ago, and it was devastating. It really was devastating because he was there with me from day one, and it's hard to see those milestones go.
Right, and the more we travel through life, all of them seem to
the more it happens,
fall over every second day. Something happens. Steve Bluestein's with us, a comedy writer, comedy star, one of the foundlings of the Groundlings.
Right.
I got your number from Brian Cox up here in Saskatoon area, and we were talking about the same subject, comedy, and he says to aspiring, get your 5 minutes and practice and practice and practice, and then be expected that it's not always going to work out. And I guess the same kind of advice holds true all the time, right? For you, for anybody.
Well, the thing is, I've actually been asked to teach a class at the Coachella Valley Rep on stand-up, and it met last night, and we were discussing that in the old days, when I started in the 70s, I learned from people in the 60s who learned from people in the 50s and the 40s. And those people in the 40s, they had television, they had vaudeville, they learned their craft on their feet on stage, and that was passed down. So the present crop of comedians don't have that. And what's happening is they're learning from each other. And in doing that, they all sound the same, they all talk about the same stuff, and instead of elevating the craft of stand-up comedy to make you think, like George Carlin made you think. He made you laugh, but he made you think. In order to bring that kind of humor to stage, it's not happening anymore. And what you're getting are comics who all they're doing are talking about the same subjects, their relationships, their crotches, their their drugs, and it all sounds the same. And no one has come with an original voice, with the exception of John Mulvaney. I believe his name is. I absolutely love that man. He is brilliant. He has a voice. He is funny, and he's the person that these new crop of comics should be looking to learn from, because learning from each other, it's not right. It's like mutual masturbation. It just doesn't work.
Right. Well, I guess you're right in that regard. I don't think I want to go to that territory quite yet. But...
Oh, yeah. No, but thanks for asking.
Thank you. Steve Bluestein with us. So is there a way to define what is funny?
Well, I define it. I always say there are two types of comics. There is the intrinsically funny comic, and then there is the comic who knows that if he says 7 words in a row and he stops, the audience will laugh. David Brenner was an intrinsically funny comic. Here's an example. David was walking down the street in New York City, and a manhole blew up and went up into the air 25 feet. David looked at it and said, "Heads." That's an intrinsically funny person. That's someone who sees the world differently than other people. Paula Poundstone, Elaine Boozler, Howie Mandel, those are all intrinsically funny people. Then there are people who are technicians, who have learned that if you write 7 words in a row and you stop, the audience will laugh at that. Now, they're equally talented. I mean, it takes a talent to learn how to do that, but they're not the kind of funny that it's that gut funny that I love. Like this John Mulvaney is intrinsically funny. He sees the world funny. He has an attitude. His delivery is funny. Did that answer the question?
I think so, in a funny sort of way.
Yeah, in a strange way. Yeah,
exactly. Okay. I'm sorry that we have to wrap things up, but I've double booked myself. Maybe I'll call you back some other time in a few months so we can do it again. But
anytime. I'm always here.
Tell us about your books again.
All right. Take My Prostate, Please is available on Amazon.com. It's published by Bear Manor Media, and it's available in Kindle and Nook and Barnes & Noble and iBook and eBook, and for enough money I'll come to your house and I'll read it to you. And the Memoir of a Nobody, also available on Amazon in the same format, published by the same publisher. And I'm sure if you buy the books, you'll get yourself a good laugh.
And that's
what I'm told.
That's what it's all about, getting a good laugh, because if you think about it, the inevitable is going to happen, and we don't want to laugh about that. So get a good laugh out there and have fun. And I'm glad your prostate is no longer with you, but you're still with us. So that's good. Thank you. Steve Bluestein is with us. Steve, thank you very much.
Hey, it was my pleasure. Anytime.
Thank you for visiting with us today. This is Talking Books and Stuff with Dennis Rimmer. Contact him at dennis@talkingbooks.tk. Thank you, and may all the good news be yours. Oh, and don't forget to check out his book, The Great Canadian Notebook, available across Canada and at amazon.ca.